Wales were dispatched in round one. We ran the French close in round two 2 weekends ago, and now the Italians are in town as the Six Nations resumes this weekend. You're all very welcome to The Takeaway, sponsored by Chicago Down, sponsors of all our Six Nations coverage here on Balls.ie. My name is Máire Treasa and I'm delighted to be joined, as always, by Gordon Darcy. You're very welcome, Gordon.
Hi, Máire Treasa. How are you?
And I'm very well. And also joining us to give a unique perspective on both sides, we have former Leinster, Benetton, Ireland under-20s and Italian capped Ian McKinley joining us very shortly. But first up, Gordon, if we look back on 2 weekends ago, it feels like a long time ago now, but 2 rounds down, 3 to go. How do you look back on Ireland's performance in Paris now? How would you assess it? Are you still as positive as you were?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably even a little bit more positive. Watched it again, and even though there was such a heavy toll from the French physicality, we still could have robbed that game. A little bit more composure, a little bit more clear thinking, and we could have come away with more points. So the ability for this team to absorb that amount of stress in the opening 40 minutes and come back out, score the tries they did in the manner they did, it's a huge amount to be optimistic about. And particularly with Joey Carbery being in at 10. So I think like there definitely was some areas. I think if we just look at it from an Irish perspective, that they would look at it and go, had we done X, Y, and Z, we definitely could have won that game. If you look at from, I'm sure the French are sitting there going, we won the game, we closed it out. They stopped playing for a large part in the last the second half. They stopped playing. They really, really, really wanted to win. You can see there's a huge focus on winning for them, and that possibly took away from how they approached the game. So on balance, how everything turned out, I think there's a huge amount to be positive with from an Irish perspective.
Well, looking ahead to this weekend now, Andy Farrell was never going to make wholesale changes, but what do you think of the changes that he has made to the side? I suppose Michael Lowry coming in and James Lowe, it brings an excitement to the back line, and everyone was calling for Carbery to start, and he does.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to get Ian's view on this as well. I think Carbery had to start. I think he did enough in Paris, and there was no necessity to rush Johnny back in. And we have to start dividing that game plan. If these are going to be our 210s over the next kind of 18 months, they both need to be comfortable. I made a point earlier in the week that there's no gap in skill between Sexton and Carbery. There's a gap in experience, and that needs to be bridged for Joey Carbery. Selection-wise, I think some of them were forced. I'm not sure Ryan Baird will be getting the game time he is getting. Had 2 of the other second rows been available. But I'm delighted he is, because he does give a different athleticism than any of the other second rows we have. Even to Tyg Byrne, he gives a different option. Outside of that, James Lowe is always coming back in. He's got so much credit in the bank from November. And I think everywhere else it's a little bit safe, and it's a little bit safe. Lowry coming in is one I am excited about, and hopefully he does what he's been doing for Ulster in the green jersey this weekend.
Are jerseys up for grabs realistically, or do you think the team for the England game is already set in stone, or do people really have a chance to put their hands up this weekend?
I think if you look at the players that are out, I would say there is Andrew Conway. If both wingers play to the potential we know they can, there is probably a decision on the wings as to 3 quality players. Only 3 doesn't go into 2. I would be surprised if Hugo Keenan isn't reinstated in there. In the centre, like really, you're picking between 2 Lion centres at inside centre and probably Gary Ringrose on the outside. So, is there a bad decision there? I'm not so sure there is too many positions really up for grabs, other than players getting experience and getting in front of Andy Farrell in a match day scenario.
Okay, well, to get our Italian view now, I'm delighted to be joined by someone who was capped 9 times by the Azzurri. Ian McKinley, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys keeping?
I'm good. How is life in Derry treating you since you moved home?
Colder, a lot colder. I miss the sun. No, it's all good, and you know, happy to be here. My wife is from here, so we're settling in, and but yeah, we look forward to getting back over to Italy for some much needed sunshine.
Oh, we could all do with it. Well, you played 3 times against Ireland. You made your international debut in 2017 against Fiji, I think. So it's such a remarkable achievement after everything you've been through. But lining up personally against Ireland, what was that like?
Yeah, certainly surreal, but I suppose when you sort of reflect on it now, as you said, 3 games and 3 losses are not exactly happy memories that I would have of playing against Ireland, but certainly it's you know, surreal when you, as a kid, were sort of lining up to Ireland's call and singing that, and then all of a sudden you find yourself singing a different national anthem and then listening to it. So yeah, it was certainly a different feeling. But when you're on the pitch and sort of working towards an objective for the week or an objective for the weekend, and you don't achieve it, that sort of competitiveness eats away at you. So certainly three losses is not something that I'll look back on with too many memories, but no, it was certainly enjoyable to play against friends that you'd sort of grown up with as well. So memories to certainly take away. And
you'll be donning a green jersey, I hope, this weekend.
You're putting me on the spot now. I'll say no comment. I'll say no comment to that one.
So looking, Ian, at where Italy are currently at, they've lost 34 games. They haven't won a game since 2015. And there's a lot of talk about the structures that are in place in Italy at the moment. Like when Conor O'Shea and Stephen Abboud came in, it seemed like they were going in the right direction. Like you can see the under-18s and the under-20s making progress, but that all seems to be dismantled now. Talk to us about the changes that have happened and where Italy are at the moment.
Yeah, I think when Conor came in, I think his sort of vision was long term, which I think a lot of, you know, international coaches are all about the here and now, which is obviously, you know, one way of going about it. You sort of live by the sword, you die by the sword. But Conor certainly is a visionary and had a vision for Italian rugby. And I think when you see the under-18 results of the last few years, beating Ireland, England and Scotland consistently, and to go with that, the under-20s, I know the under-20s had a fantastic 6-0 win against England under-20s, which was well documented. So I suppose for me, having experienced Italy for being over there for nearly a decade, the really frustrating element for me is that you have fantastic players, and Italy has always produced wonderful players. You know, when Gordon would have played against Italian national teams, I mean, you had Parise, you had Bergamasco brothers, you had wonderful players that were produced there, but certainly the structure is not on par with a lot of the other unions and a lot of the home nations that take part in the Six Nations. There's a massive drop off from under-18s rugby to senior rugby, and that's certainly a bridge that needs to be addressed by the federation. But I think a lot of people have to understand as well with, and it's not an excuse, but rugby, if you were to get an average sport lover in Italy to write down the top 10 sports in Italy, rugby would struggle to make the top 10. I mean, you've got a lot of love for football, a lot of love for basketball, the winter sports, MotoGP, Formula One, all those. So rugby isn't as popular as it is in Ireland and Wales. I mean, it's the national sport in Wales. So that is sort of a constant battle. But that is not to say that Italian rugby doesn't deserve to get support, and as I said, to see the players that do come through and continuously do come through. I mean, if we're to look at current crop of players, when you've got Paolo Garbisi, who's probably the sort of the biggest name to come out in the last few years when he's playing for Montpellier, Marco Riccioni, who plays for Saracens, Matteo Minozzi, Wasps, Jake Polledri, prior to his injury, the biggest ball carrier in the Guinness Premiership. You know, these are very important players for Italy, and it's just important that there is some sort of support network to help.
Well, one thing that won't support Italian rugby, Gordon, is if the changes that the talk that's going on at the moment about the South Africans joining the Six Nations at the expense of Italy in 2025. What do you make of all of that?
Yeah, well, there was a statement put out by the Six Nations about it and saying they're not entertaining it. Wouldn't be the first time we were given a cloudy response to a fairly imminent situation arising. Like Italy are a stakeholder in the Six Nations, so I think it's going to be very hard to replace them. I think that is important. It has been a frustration that Italian rugby hasn't kicked on from everybody on the outside, and I know it's a heavily politicized union and structures in there, and the incoming presidents get an awful lot of autonomy to do whatever they kind of feel is in either their best interest or the structures. It's hard to see how South Africa are not going to be tethered to the Northern Hemisphere with the provincial teams playing in the URC and in Europe next year. And it's kind of interesting, that the European Rugby Cup was renamed the Champions Cup, and Europe was kind of taken out of it a few years ago. And lo and behold, now we have non-European teams. Maybe that's just the conspiracists been hanging out with Peter Coyle maybe too much. But it's hard to see how if the club teams are playing on a Northern Hemisphere time schedule, that the senior team does not inevitably end up in there. But I think one of the things we have to be cognizant about is that if that happens, it will have long and telling repercussions into the Southern Hemisphere rugby and the structures and the financial viability of professional rugby. And I think that is something that's not being treated lightly by the stakeholders. So I think there's an awful lot to play out in this.
And would it destroy the essence of the Six Nations as a tournament as well? There's a lot of history with the Six Nations, and if you bring in the South Africans, lose the Italians, it's not the same competition.
No, it's not. But the Five Nations was very different to the Six Nations, and as change is inevitable. I suppose I'm not against change or the competition evolving once it is the best thing for all the stakeholders involved. So that's all the Six Nations, and for rugby as well, because rugby is a stakeholder in this, and removing somebody from moving from the Northern Hemisphere, from the Southern Hemisphere, it does, like, that would be a nail on the coffin in Australian rugby potentially. They are and have been financially insolvent for a number of years. So, to take away that competition that they exist in, and, they're going to exist on World Cup and a Lions every 12 years. There are CBC might have a lot of power, but I don't think they have that much power just to push things through. But I think, like, what it is, I think actually, and not a conversation for today, but it has put into focus the how self-sustaining professional rugby is, and had it grown too big, too fast, too soon. And actually COVID has made people look an awful lot at the way their business models and operating models exist.
From an Italian point of view, could relegation or something like that be an option? Could, I suppose, the fear of relegation, would that help in any way? Would it push Italian rugby to go in the right direction? Ian?
I think it's sort of a similar discussion. I think, you could have one bad year, and could you imagine a Wales getting relegated? I don't think any union, if I'm to be honest, I don't think would sign up to something like that. But definitely the performances of Italy the last few years, even the last Six Nations, when you have a points difference of minus 184, if you're to call the Six Nations the greatest championship on the planet, you have to have competitive games every round, and particularly the one against England when it was the 33-0 defeat a couple of weeks ago. That was draining to watch, and I'm sure from a general public view, from the hardcore fans, to watch those games are not exactly pleasing to watch. So I can understand from a stakeholder's point of view or from a commercial point of view, that's a very difficult product to produce. But I definitely know if Italy were to be left out of a Six Nations discussion in the future, for me, it would be certainly damaging for Italian rugby. I know Kieran Crowley has stated that he wouldn't mind seeing a promotion and relegation, and almost for Italy to start winning again. I remember my first cap with Italy was a win, and I remember former international came into me and said, you fall into a very distinct group. And I said, why? Well, because you've played for Italy on your first game and you've won, and 8 defeats later you can see why. But Italy just falls at the minute in between a category of nations that are just performing at an exceptionally high level. I think probably the highest that other nations have been performing in the last few years, and just unfortunately they have just fallen, or Italy, we have fallen a little bit behind in comparison to everyone else. But I think, as Gordon was saying, there's certainly no sort of quick fix to this, and all these options that are coming about can have huge implications for other things, as Gordon was saying, in terms of Australian rugby and everything.
Yeah, like when we talk with my dad, and sometimes when we wanted something, we'd plant a seed, and then we'd come back to it 6 months, 9 months later, and it would be his idea coming back to us. You kind of get the feeling with this, it's being tested in the water. What's the uproar going to be around this? And it's been fairly unanimous that majority of the Northern Hemisphere would not be in favour of South Africa joining the Six Nations. I think with Italy in a broader context, you could only engage with that relegation promotion if there is a second tier tournament happening in parallel, and that standard of rugby is rising, because for me it would be a death sentence to relegate Italian rugby, and they go back and they start getting beaten. They got beaten by Georgia and Portugal, and then it stops to make sense anymore. But if that standard of rugby has come up, and actually the concept of relegation is not as unpalatable, because you're going down to a level. So until that's brought up, I don't think we can entertain that sort of a concept. And that is, I know that is years away from any sort of stability in a second tier tournament. Because
even with that, I think Neil Doak, I think, has gone on record as well in his time in Georgia, saying that, would he accept Georgia, going into the Six Nations and promotion relegation? I think this was a couple of years ago, and he said Georgia aren't ready, don't have the infrastructure, and probably not really thinking about it. So I think that is a really important thing, that you almost don't want a situation where it's just the same team going up and down, because then you're getting into the same sort of problem, just with different teams. So I think that point of making sure that what is beneath that is more regular and more competitive at the moment. And as I said, that's why Italy just falls in between that little category of being better than the lower nations, but that gap between the middle nations and the rest, the top 5 at the moment, is just far and beyond greater than what it has ever been.
Yeah, well, I'm sure the debate will linger on, and we won't solve it today, but we don't want to lose a trip to Rome just yet. But we're here with thanks to Chicago Town, sponsors of all our Six Nations coverage here on Balls.ie, and a reminder that we have some jerseys and precious Chicago Town vouchers to give away, so be sure to pop over to the Chicago Town Instagram page and Balls.ie as well, and stay tuned, as we will have some tickets to give away for the Scotland game next month as well. But lads, if we focus on Sunday, Italy last beat Ireland in March 2013. That was 9 years ago in Rome. Teams are not only expected to beat Italy, but with a bonus point as well. Gordon, I'll come to you first. Will it be as comfortable as everyone is expecting?
Yeah, I'd have no concerns about what Ireland are trying to do. I think the way France and England played against Italy, it was death it was a sledgehammer smash over the head. I know the weather wasn't great in both games, but it was just sucked the life out of them and just strangled them, because they can do that. Ireland play a very, very fast tempo game. They've kept the spine of the team that they know is going to deliver. Kept the front row. Tyke Byrne is in there, Darius Van. So majority of the pack is there, and the halfback partnership from Paris. So we expect Ireland to go hard and to go fast. And if you look at the matchups individually as well as collectively, I don't see much room for Italy in this one, and particularly with one undoubtedly motivated Johnny Sexton to come off the bench. I wouldn't say there's going to be any drop off in tempo when substitutions are made.
As a former out half, Ian, can we get your thoughts on the debate in the build up to this game? Everyone was talking about whether Joey should start or whether Johnny should start. And obviously there's more value if we're looking ahead to the World Cup and having Joey Carbery start this weekend. You can't assess really where he's at after one game, but your thoughts on how he performed in Paris and what you're expecting him to build on this weekend.
Yeah, I think it was his first game, you know, when his first ever start in the Six Nations, which is sort of crazy to think at 26. And it seems, I mean, he's been around the international scene for the guts of 5 years now. So it was certainly a big moment for him. It's very difficult to play. I think you ask any out half, if your pack are being, out muscled, it's very difficult to try and put forward your best game. I thought he covered himself pretty well. I think his kicking off the ground out of hand was his off the tee was very good, out of hand was good. And I think, you don't want to get into a dangerous debate of comparing him all the time to Sexton. I mean, Johnny is Johnny for a reason. And he's gotten there through, an incredibly consistent level of performance, but over many years. And I think there was only one decision. Gordon said it at the start, to start Joey Carbery. He had to start this game. I mean, it's a perfect game for him, and it's a perfect game to suit his style of rugby, which is playing fast tempo. He's able to find gaps. He's able to get himself out of trouble. And I think obviously the Italian defense is not, our defense is not the same as a French defense, obviously. So it'll 100% suit him. But these are moments that he's going to have to try and grab hold of, because I think that has been the failings of two previous Irish campaigns at World Cups, which has been whenever top line players have gone down there, maybe the guys in behind haven't maybe gotten that time. And I think Johnny even said, was it yesterday or a couple of days ago, you need 4 players at least per position if you're trying to compete for a World Cup. There was Stephen Donald kicking a winning goal for New Zealand back in 2011, and he was 4th choice. That sometimes you might need that. And, I think it's just a really good game for Joey Carbery to get, and just the more experience he gets, Michael Lowry, Dan Sheehan now getting in, that will make the squad more competitive for the next round of games, but ultimately to the benefit of Irish rugby going forward.
It also makes it easier for him to come into this game, Ian, because I think the way they're playing, they're trying to not have everything go through the 10. And that's been very, very obvious in the opening games, actually, for all the way through the November. So if you look at the way Connacht are playing, everything has to go through Jack Carty. When he's going well, it goes great. When he doesn't go well, they suffer as a result. And that was probably fair to say when everything was driven through the 10 channel. Whereas now you look at the amount of players that are making decisions, that are given the freedom and the ability to play. And again, that suits Joey Carbery because it gives him that little bit of freedom. He doesn't have to do everything. He can pick his opportunity of when to go and when to strike. And I completely agree with you, to echo your point. He managed when Ireland were on the back foot, he kept his forwards as much as humanly possible on the front foot. So it's, he has been really good, and he's been full value for starting again this week.
Yeah, it's very exciting to see all these multiple playmakers, especially our forwards when they get on the ball. But the Grand Slam is gone now, but Ireland, they still have a chance of winning the Six Nations. How likely is it now that we'll win our remaining fixtures and that France will slip up? Gordon, if you want to come in first.
I was just going to say, Ian, are you shaking your magic 8 ball there?
No.
I think Ireland have to come back from the edge a little bit. We had a little bit of a reality check or a wake up in Paris, and kind of going, okay, this is up here, and we were in a very, very close game. England will look to mirror that type of approach against Ireland. So we have our work cut out there. And Scotland, who knows what Scotland is going to show up? It just you just wonder where that sense of self-belief comes from. before every tournament. Every time they play a game, they just say, "Yeah, we did. Yeah, we're," and then they just play up and down. So you never know what you're going to get with Scotland. And that's very, very hard to prepare for. So Ireland have, out of 2 of the 3 games, have 2 very, very, very tough games to navigate. So I think it's we're not at that level of consistency of performance to go, we should be expecting to get in a position to win trophies. We have to win those two games. Should that happen, you're kind of praying for France to mess it up. Are they going to? There's something in this French team that I haven't seen in a long time, and that little ruthlessness is there. And again, it's some key figures driving it. Dubois is the architect in behind that. And will they slip up? I don't see it as being as likely as it would have been in years gone by.
Yeah, the Triple Crown is still up for grabs, of course, and that's extra motivation to keep this momentum going as well, Ian. Yeah,
of course. I mean, any sort of silverware you get domestically and more importantly internationally, I suppose, is absolutely worth fighting for. But I think, this Irish team would be more, realistic in that. Andy Farrell has said that he's put it out to the players, to go for the World Cup. That's ultimately what they want. And, I think it'll just be making sure the consistency of performance is still there, that you try and get as many players sort of bled into the squad, and consistency of performance and everything like that as much as possible. But I think it definitely is France's to lose. Scotland could pull out a miracle game like they have done against France. But yeah, as Gordon said, France just, whatever, they have a connection with the public at the moment. If you watch some of their training videos, they've got the public in watching, cheering them on. Sean Edwards, their defense is just so ruthless, and the power game they have, and then they've got special players. So it is France's to lose, absolutely. But I suppose from an Irish point of view, all they can do is just continue what they can only control, what they have in front of them. And I'm sure, they won't fear any of the last 3 games that they're going to encounter.
Before we finish up, what kind of scoreline should we expect this weekend?
I think the bookies at +40 for Ireland. So I think it does hurt me to say it, but I think you have to be realistic as well about the situation, and Ireland would be expecting to win by that minimum amount. I would say if Ireland can get quick ball, play at their tempo with the bench they have, sort of the whole squad ethos that they have, the way that Mike Catt has them playing, and I think he does deserve an awful lot of credit. The type 5 forwards in particular, you talk about Tyke Furlong's passing ability now, and Tyke Byrne making good decisions. I just think Italy will really struggle unless they are really competitive at the breakdown, scrum line out. But that only came in little parts in the first game against France and England. There was none of those. So if they don't bring that, it could be a really, really long day for Italy.
Gordon?
Yeah, it's going to be like a bit more succinct. It's potentially a cricket score coming up in this stage. You would expect, you have to respect a team enough to beat them by what they deserve to be beaten by. And for the way Ireland are playing versus what Italy are providing, if they don't beat the bookie spread, it would be a bad day at the office.
Okay, well, we're all very confident so for an Ireland win, and for our Celtic cousins perhaps to do us a favour. My thanks to Gordon and to Ian for joining us today. We're here with thanks to Chicago Town, sponsors of The Takeaway, and all our Six Nations coverage on Balls.ie. Be sure to get your Chicago Town pizza in before the big game, and we'll see you next weekend for the next game, or in 2 weekends' time. We have a break week, of course, next weekend, but be sure to join us again on The Takeaway and enjoy the games this weekend.